People always follow through on who they believe themselves to be. There's no other way to put it. That simple idea has drastically changed my life. It doesn't matter what season of life I'm in or what path I'm walking down. How I view myself at that time is always directly proportional to the outcome. And when you think about it, it's not magic. You can unpack it in a very practical, pragmatic way. How you see yourself determines how you act, and how you act shapes your reality. Runners don't break weightlifting records, and bodybuilders don't break running records, right? These characters identify themselves a certain way, and so every day breathe life into that identity. They follow through on who they believe they are. So, quick personal anecdote, right? I've started calling myself the best speechwriter on planet Earth. You could hear that and think, well, how audacious, how pretentious. Really, dude? You've never written speeches for presidents or world leaders. The reach of your words pale in comparison to even some current podcasters and YouTubers, public speakers. But here's the deal. If you don't believe yourself worthy of something, if you don't pick out the shoes that are, let's say, a few sizes too big, you'll have nothing to grow into. See, there's power in saying you're the best because, again, we tend to hit the targets that we aim for. I don't have time for this cross my fingers and we'll see stuff. And this is, in my mind, incredibly relevant to you and your pursuits, whatever they are. Because when we're not yet there, we tend to be timid in our approach, right? It's like, who am I to do X? Why should I think I'm good enough to do Y or Z? No, stop and own it. That's perhaps the most important thing I've learned over the last 10 years of life. And I'm not talking about feigning competency. I'm talking about simply owning the pursuit and acknowledging that you will be where you most need to be if you trust yourself. If you show up like you are that person, like you are worthy. One of my favorite sayings, walk into every room like God sent you, and why shouldn't you? Way back, maybe 2014, I heard Tony Robbins say, if you believe yourself a smoker, you'll never quit smoking. Period. And to be clear, I'm paraphrasing, I don't ever want to misquote someone, but think about the idea, right? It's like, I'm a smoker, but man, I'm hoping this patch will work out. No. If you believe in your mind that you're a smoker, guess what you'll do the second things become challenging? Revert back to your old ways. That is, after all, who you are, right? Or another relatable one, that phrase, we've all heard it, I'm not a morning person. I don't wake up early, I don't do mornings. Sure, there are some biological preconditions, right, for those who perform best in the AM versus the PM. But let's be real, if your life depended on it, are you telling me you couldn't wake up early? If everything was on the line, would 5:30 or 6 be an impossible task? Of course not. It's just that when that alarm goes off and you view it as a reach or a stretch or an I hope so or out of character, forget about it. Your brain's gonna remind you you don't do well in the morning anyway, you'll roll over and the rest will be history. See, the point is, it matters how you see yourself. I get asked about college quite a bit, funny enough, from young people, sometimes even parents looking for an opinion on it. Is it a necessity? And the answer is, of course, it depends. But I can speak personally, and I'm grateful for two things. I learned to analyze/write, and I learned as a D1 athlete to become the type of person who finds a way. That may seem obvious, but the way it was dropped in front of me was revolutionary. My epiphany was freshman year on that rowing machine doing 2,000 meter sprints, hurting, And the coach being like, you don't understand. You don't get it. It doesn't matter that you're in pain, right? Because the Georgetown guy right now at a gym 500 miles away is suffering too. But his little screen says he's going faster. So that means you find a way or you lose. And it was like, my world opened up. You don't stop when it hurts. You stop when you figure it out. Regardless of what happens on race day, you show up the next day, you find a way to make that screen say you're pulling faster than you were the day before. Be the type of person who continues to show up and evolve. That's not what you do, that's who you are. That's why transformation with health generally doesn't occur until you make an overall lifestyle change. Because you're not just a guy or gal going to the gym. No, you are a healthy person living a healthy life. Of course you're going to the gym and eating well and surrounding yourself with other healthy people. That's what healthy people do. That is your identity. Remember, people will always follow through on who they believe themselves to be. And so in a world with infinite upside, be someone who finds a way. Always. One of my favorite ideas by legendary author and speaker Jim Rohn was, it's not that it costs too much, it's that you can't afford it. And whoa, what a flipping of the script. It doesn't cost too much to someone else out there. There are people who can afford it. You're just not one of them. At least not right now. Why has this had such an impact on me? Well, it's my reminder, first and foremost, to take that finger pointing out at the world, turn it around and point it directly at my chest. It says, maybe the variable here in need of change is me. Maybe if they can afford it, so can I. Maybe it's not the price that needs to come down. Maybe it's that my value in the marketplace, my skill set, my abilities need to rise. That's not too expensive. I just need to level up. There's nothing like taking what would be a gripe with the world and transforming it into the very reason you're going to be better. Because really, we always have that choice. We can project out and complain about the ones who scratched and clawed their way to the top, who have more than us, or we can join them. Option 1 keeps you down, on your back, looking up at the sky. Option 2 places the world in the palm of your hand. So given the choice, don't complain about the price, become someone who can pay. Don't envy their success. Drive yourself to stand atop a podium of your own making. Don't throw stones, stack them, and make them your foundation. Life is a game of bettering yourself, especially when it's not easy to. You know how much easier it is in the short term to put your feet up and list off all the people who slighted you along the way, refer to them as the problem? You know how easy it is to find reasons you can't? To paint worst case scenarios into the sky? Incredibly easy. It's temporary weight off your shoulders. It's, oh, I can't get to the moon, so hey, no need to build that rocket ship. What's for dinner? Yeah, that's what we call the easy way out. And while it may feel good in the short term, It doesn't bridge that gap between the cost of what you want and what you can afford to pay. What it does is justify and rationalize not enough. Because when you fight for your limitations, as the saying goes, you get to keep them. And in a world where victimhood is becoming currency, and more people are falling for the illusion of short-term gratification, the temporary peace of mind we get when we deflect. When you call yourself a victim, it's not your fault. But when it's not your fault, it's not yours to fix. And there lies the issue. The name of the game is betterment. It's progress. That's not too expensive. I just need to increase my worth. I need to put myself in a position where I scoff at what was once considered too expensive. I need to build myself up, not wish the world around me was pulled down. And when this switch occurs, life changes. You realize the fluidity of things, that everything is relative. You can't change the price, but you can change you. And you can do so in a massively substantial way. You can build yourself up so high that the old you becomes unrecognizable. But the first step is realizing that personal agency opens the door. Accountability and dedication push you through it. That's where the magic is. Becoming so valuable that the externalities are minor details, observers of your ascent. It's time to take the ideal and chip away at it like an axe to a tree. It's time to look at the world less from a lens of what am I allowed to do, and more from the perspective of it's all mine if I find the courage to grow into my potential, to capture and cash in on my value. Every day you choose to become more valuable and skilled. Every time you do the hard thing today for a greater you tomorrow, expensive means less and less. The price tag is fixed. Your potential, your greatness is not. So rise to the occasion. Tap into you 2.0 and prove just how relative cost really is. So you're scared to start. Scared of what could go wrong. Maybe you're scared of what people will say, scared of what you might lose. Perhaps you're scared of hurting your ego, your pride. Scared of a world that isn't quite as predictable as the one you're living in. These are no small variables, you think to yourself. And so, yeah, why wouldn't you be scared to begin? But I have a question. How scared are you to not go? How scared are you of things staying exactly the same? How scared are you of looking back in 50 years and wishing you'd given it a try? How scared are you of seeing those around you, perhaps with a tad more courage, live out meaningful lives while you watch from afar? How scared are you of being the person who tells stories about how they almost tried, almost jumped? Stories about how things could have been if only. Because to me, that's far scarier. In fact, when weighing these two options side by side, I find that not going is almost always scarier. And maybe that's it. Understanding the normalcy of being nervous to start something new. It's human. It's a mere fight with our biological tendencies. Right? That's something every person deals with, and that's okay. To go is to jump into that pool, to feel the cold water on your skin. And yeah, temporarily it's uncomfortable. There's shortness of breath. But then you acclimate. Right? You're presented the luxury of a swim on a warm summer day. You get the feeling of being refreshed and renewed. Being scared to go is curable. Because in going, the fear is undone. The pain is ultimately diluted. Here's the catch, though. There is no cure for not going. You don't acclimate to dreams never realized or paths never taken. You don't warm up to the question, what if? Next time you find yourself worried about what could go wrong, scared about what could become of you as you embark upon something new, realize the normalcy of that feeling, a sentiment shared by all humans. It doesn't mean you're wrong. Fear is the cost of admission. Fear kicks and screams the hardest when it knows it's about to be broken down and destroyed. This is what life's all about, turning temporary fear into something of meaning. The question is, and should always be, not how scared are you in this moment, but how scared are you to not go? Inaction, immobility, that's the monster in the closet. Refusing to take the risk or step out. That's where fear, although maybe small at first, grows over time, becomes unmanageable, transforms into regret. So again, ask yourself, although yes, it's scary to go, how does that compare to years from now, wondering what life could have been like with a little more courage? Will embarking upon a meaningful journey be scary? Of course. But considering the alternative, how scary would it be not to? There are two kinds of crossroads. First, the external. The crossroads that life, beyond your control, places before you. The abrupt changes, the sudden twists, the tragedies, even the occurrences we don't quite understand, and so chalk them up as fate. And then there are the internal. The crossroads that you manufacture, the ones that are self-created, self-induced. You know what, I've had enough of this crossroads. The I deserve better crossroads. There's more out there and today I'm going to find it crossroads. And I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. In fact, I think sometimes when we wait too long to manufacture our own crossroads, life steps in and gives us a little nudge. The universe pushes us towards that change like a wind at our back. Doesn't quite make things black and white, doesn't always put a catastrophe in front of us. Sometimes it's the mere whispering that, hey, you're accepting more pain, more friction than you should be. It reminds us to take accountability, to take control of life, something that we seemingly forget more often than we should. One of my favorite stories is Jim Rohn's famous epiphany or light bulb moment. The point where, he basically realizes enough's enough, right? I'm creating a crossroads here and going down the road that I've known for a long time I should have walked down. And it all starts with a knock at his door. It's a Girl Scout, right, trying to sell him cookies. He walks up, opens the door, and just desperately with all of his being, wishes he could buy cookies from this Girl Scout, but he can't because he's broke. He doesn't have the money to buy a box. And so to save face, he tells her, I'm sorry, but another Girl Scout was just here. You just missed her, and I bought a box of cookies from her. And she smiles, says thanks, walks away. He closes the door, and, upon closing it, says, never again. Never again will I have to turn a Girl Scout away because I cannot afford the cookies. Never again will I be in this place of lack. Never again, right? That's the beginning of a transformation. He points to that moment as the day that changed his life. He built a crossroads and changed direction in real time. Now, is this an oversimplification? Sure. Right? Massive transformations are complex, no doubt. They require a reworking of many things. But they all start with a decision. A decision to manufacture that change in your life, to take the road you are not currently taking, to walk down a new path. These decisions can hurt. They force you to become something you've never been, to do things you've never done. That's no cakewalk. But it's a different kind of hurt. It's the short-term discomfort pushing against friction. It's the building of muscle, which is way different than the psychological hurt of knowing that you're out of alignment. Knowing deep down there's more in you and that it's fading away with each passing day. That's hurt. And we all know in some capacity that life doesn't always create circumstances that move us. Right? Life waits for us to move ourselves. It waits for the I've had enough moment. It waits for us to see the present not as all there is, but rather a doorway to the next thing. There are two kinds of crossroads, and I'm a believer that a meaningful existence means not waiting for the external to push you, but allowing the internal to drive you. It's the classic stands or the stage. Where do you want to be? You can sit and watch, clap when you're happy, boo when you're mad, but ultimately not be in control. Or you can choose to perform, to be on stage, to narrate, to choose your ending, elevate your character, become the hero of your story. And I say this as someone who, at points, has, simply waited too long. Looking around, right? Praying for the gust of wind that would propel me to the place that I needed to be. Essentially, not understanding that life was waiting for me to greenlight my own journey. Life is about the turns we take at the crossroads before us. And so, never underestimate your ability to create that intersection most true to you. And never underestimate your courage to take the turn that you know in your soul needs to be taken. I think a substantial amount of life comes down to self-trust, to believing in yourself. Right? But here's the thing, it's not blind belief. It's not toxic positivity where you close your eyes, cross your fingers, shut the world off, and just assume things will work out because you're entitled to a great result. No, what I'm referring to is an active and deliberate trusting of yourself to learn, to make the necessary adjustments, and to keep moving forward. When we have faith in our ability to step forward and improve simultaneously, there is no defeat. When you know you won't stop until you land where you want to land, then limitations become a choice. Success in any capacity is a you thing, not an outside thing. And this popped into my head a few days ago during, of all things, a game of axe throwing. So, quick story from last weekend. A friend of mine and I, after a day of working on the podcast, went down to Fort Lauderdale to this axe throwing place, which is, it's random, but it's a great time. Simple concept. There's this giant target, and you take turns throwing little axes at the target, basically darts, right? If you think along those lines. And there were 8 of us in the group. They divide you into 2 teams of 4, and you play various games until the end, right? The end, there's this final session where it's every person for themselves. It's like a free-for-all. Each person gets 3 rounds to throw axes at the target, and whoever has the best score wins. So think of the target just in a traditional way, right? The bullseye, or the little point in the middle, is worth 5. Then the next smallest circle outside of that is 4. Then 3, then 2, and then the biggest circle along the edge is worth 1. Right? So whatever you hit with the axe, that's the point you get. Except they put these 2 little blue dots on the top third of the circle. And they say if you can hit one of these blue dots, you get 10 points. So high risk, but certainly high reward. And my friend and I, super competitive, right? He looks at me, starts telling me how he's already got this in the bag. And I'm like, all right, we'll see. And it's been arguable, but I probably had been the more consistent of both of us up to that point in the night. Nothing fancy, just straight away aiming at the middle, aiming for those bullseyes and 4s. Not even attempting to go for those, hard to reach blue dots. No need, straight up the middle. Okay, and here's why this is important. We step out to take our first shots of the finale here. My friend goes first, immediately hits one of those little blue dots. Boom, already, I'm down 10 points. So what do? I completely leave my strategy. And I start thinking, no, I'm behind. I can't let this happen. I spent my next 9 shots, and the only 9 shots I had, right, trying to hit those blue dots and missing every time, just get killed, right? He won handedly. And then I realized when the scores were read out at the end that if I just ignored everything my buddy had done and stayed true to my game, aimed for the center of the board, averaged 3.5 or 4 points a throw, I would have won, and by a substantial margin. But I let the outside world impact my strategy. I started chasing those long shot blue dots when I knew they were a distraction. Right. Now, I'm sure the last thing you expected to hear today was the recap of an axe throwing contest. But if you bear with me, there's value here, right? So let's step beyond the axe throwing. Let's take it up a level. Let's talk about when you know what's best for you, you know where you want to be and what's working, but you're pulled out of your lane because of what someone else says or does. You hear him or her over there accomplish something great. You look in the mirror and go, man, I haven't accomplished anything like that, right? Maybe I need to change what I'm doing, my approach. Maybe I'm wrong. See, and the beauty of that little game was that it reminded me that there will always be outside circumstances trying to redirect my course. But we have to trust in ourselves that we are doing what's best. We have to know our own game and our own strengths. Now, don't conflate this with a stubbornness. It's not about never adjusting. No, we need to adjust. But adjust when it's best for you. Not simply because other people are taking a different approach. Right? It's hard to stay consistent with the world pushing other options consistently, right? People finding success in various ways, taking other paths, talking about their incredible strategies and how great X, Y, and Z is. But it's all noise. You have to trust you. And again, not blind faith, but an understanding of who you are and a willingness to continue to grow with every step forward. There has to be some element of understanding that, sure, things will get challenging, life will push back, but that doesn't mean you are wrong or in over your head. It's a compounding of little actions and trust in yourself. If you can do that, the world remains yours. It's day by day, or in my example, throw by throw, knowing your bullseye and aiming steady up the middle. We all know how hard it is to see results before they exist. The mind tries to find every example out there depicting why you're wrong, why the finish line is too far away. Life is constantly creating off-ramps, saying, hey, if you don't want it that bad, or you're unsure of yourself, here's a way out, come with me. Right? It's constantly sowing seeds of doubt, which is why we must dig deep for that strength. Life is a game of you versus you. If those around you win, good for them. And if they lose, well, hey, wish them well on the next go-around. But none of it has any bearing on who you are and the race you're running. Are you going to show up for you? Are you going to be your biggest fan when it takes every single part of you to keep going? Don't let the loudest voices in the room dissuade you from what you know to be right. Don't let the blue dots hinder your direct line to the bullseye. Right? Block out that noise, block out the distractions, and do what is required of you. Win your race, because that's the only finish line of value. Walk your path, because that will bring you where you need to be. And when you question the pursuit, remember what you've overcome, all the steps that brought you to right now, and how, yeah, maybe they weren't flashy or over the top, but they were consistent. They've given life to the present moment. What you do is succeed. What you do is overcome. Just don't lose your bullseye. The world reflects back at us what we currently are, like a giant mirror projecting the movie that's playing in our heads. We lay on the horn in traffic, not when we're at peace with ourselves, but when we're in duress. We gravitate towards the negative, not when we're living in abundance, but when we're living in scarcity. We quit, retreat, contract, not when we're confident in the road ahead, but when we're doubtful, alarmed. In other words, we find out in the world what already lives within us. Life, in many ways, is not absolute, it's evidence. It's evidence that we'll use to justify the things we already believe. Wayne Dyer used to use the metaphor of an orange. It can be squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, but there will never be grapefruit juice pouring out of an orange. No, grapefruit juice doesn't live there. You can only find on the outside what lives in the inside. You can only extract from the orange juice. Recently, a good friend of mine said to me that they'd like to change their financial situation. To which my response was, perfect. You most certainly can, right? Like anything, yeah, it'll take work and some planning and some restructuring, all that good stuff, but you most definitely can. And his response was, sure, that's what all you motivational people say. Okay, smart guy. Now you're an example on a podcast episode. Congrats. Why? Because you want the people around you to realize how much is possible for themselves, right? It's not sorcery or witchcraft to believe something better is possible. In fact, if one doesn't believe it's possible, they're effectively cementing their feet to the ground, at least with regard to that particular pursuit. Let's face it, you don't begin journeys that are not possible. We don't allow ourselves to do that. And so, to not believe in an outcome and somehow still wish for that outcome, well, that's essentially our orange metaphor, right? Can't squeeze financial freedom out of a mindset that only sees monetary constraint. Believing it's possible starts the journey. See, there's so much pragmatism in growth. You know, people talk a lot about the law of attraction, and yeah, I get it, right? It sets targets. But the picture of, let's say, a dream house on your wall is not why you'll eventually have the dream house. The picture of the dream house on the wall reminds you. It helps you believe that you're someone capable of someday acquiring that house, obtaining that type of success, which results in you, wait for it, doing things that help bring that to life. It is the doing. But that doing must be connected to belief. Mid-20s. I was unhappy, wanted more, but didn't really believe myself capable of obtaining more, right? That was the issue. Back to the old orange expecting grapefruit juice. Can't get results in an area not conducive to their creation, right? It wasn't until I said, you know what, maybe, not definitely, but maybe it could happen. Maybe I can take control here. The odds have to be greater than 0%, right? It's Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber, so you're saying there's a chance. Yeah, it's like starting out, that's all you need, a chance, the door cracked. In the beginning, I just needed to convince myself something different was possible. The beginning of transformation and that internal change prompted how I interacted with the external world. You do things differently when you believe differently. Or, if you want to phrase it another way, believing that you can bring something to life doesn't guarantee that you actually do. But believing you can't guarantees that you won't. And why not stack the odds in your favor? I often juggle back and forth between the philosophical and the tangible or the tactical, right? 3 ways to do X. Life hack to change Y. Yeah, of course. Life does in so many ways come down to the tactics, to the how, to the steps. But does that even matter if you don't believe in the pursuit? Does it matter what Google Maps says if you never step out your front door? You have to convince you. You have to create an environment in your world where change isn't crazy, more isn't absurd. It might be challenging, but it's possible. And possible is enough. It is enough to begin, enough to step out, enough to see the trivialities as tools and the resistance as part of a beautiful game. Remember that the world is a mirror, reflecting back at us our worldview. We find what we look for, so give yourself permission to look for things that make life beautiful. Give yourself the gift of believing change is possible. When I first started my podcast, and at that point it wasn't technically a podcast, it was only YouTube videos at the time, I would sit down, I would open my notes and start planning that particular video, and sometimes things would come to me. Sometimes they wouldn't. And when they did, I would turn on the mic and I would go. And when they didn't, I would shut down the computer and say, well, some other day then, right? Not today. And in theory, there's nothing wrong with this. I've always considered myself an artist, and while you can't force art, or can you? Because there is most definitely a shift that occurs when you look at this situation from a different angle. It's not about, quote unquote, feeling it today, as much as it's about getting done, which you have to get done in tight windows. Because sometimes that's all life gives you. A narrow window of opportunity to go or not go, to start or not start, to create or not create. There's an idea that's admittedly a tad cliche here, but it says you practice how you play. And I've spoken about this before. I think there's a ton of truth to it. Because those big picture values, they're hard to flip on and flip off. Most likely, you either do them all the time or you don't. They're either indicative of who you are or they're not, right? If your house and car and closet are a disaster, probably accurate to say that your Google or Apple calendar, if you even have one, probably isn't pristine. It's most likely in disarray, mirroring everything else in your life. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not likely. Right? Same thing with health. When I'm not eating healthy, and trust me, I've gone through periods where I've just mailed that in, right? I give a little less on my workouts, place a little less emphasis on my sleep. It snowballs, right? You get the idea. It's all related. And that's why I can honestly say in my personal and in my work life, how I do one thing is generally how I do all things. And this brings me back full circle to those writing and recording sessions. If I can close my laptop and go, not today, the muse, as Stephen Pressfield calls it, just isn't flowing through me. Maybe tomorrow. It's setting a precedent for everything. If you train your mind to create off-ramps, it will gladly take them. Because oh, how our minds love off-ramps. And this reality, it highlights the power of shutting down that possibility altogether, stopping it in its tracks, making it simple. This is a window of opportunity to execute. So execute. And will it be the best thing you've ever done? Maybe not. But maybe. The reality is, you condition your mind to show up for yourself. There's a shift that occurs when one looks at the task in front of them and asks, not, can this be done today? But rather, it will be done. How do I execute to the best of my ability? Not, I hope I have it this morning, but rather good ideas flow through me. So sit down and string a few of those ideas together. The expectation that you will produce something valuable, it has a way of ensuring you do exactly that. My personal best for a half marathon was run with the flu. Right? I could have closed that metaphorical laptop and said, some other time I don't feel well. But I repositioned the question to, how do I find a way to execute in this window of opportunity before me? Lo and behold, it was the right move. I've gone to events where I had a million other things happening in my world, right? I wasn't particularly thrilled about going, but I did because I committed. I met some people that changed my life, right? Small window, execute. When there is a task before you and you have committed to it, when leaving or turning around isn't even an option, that is a superpower. Now, obviously, there's a line reaching that sunk cost fallacy. I'm not advocating you continuously hit your head against the wall, when something's bad for you or you should be doing something different. I'm talking about those things we know we should be doing, right? The ones we're better off for, but life has presented friction in one form or another. It's very easy to identify that friction as an enemy, as a reason you can't. It's tempting to say, you'll wait until things are better or easier or perfect. But life doesn't provide those situations. It gives windows to execute. So train your mind to identify and capitalize in those moments. Understanding that while technically, you could walk away, that option is no longer available to you. Some people do what they feel like, they do what they want to, and others do what must be done. And it's the latter that creates meaningful, sustainable progress in life. As far as I'm concerned, it's the latter that brings about contentment. You could have waited for a perfect moment, but instead you said yes, consistently sat down, and in the meantime chipped away at something more important, something real. And that real thing is exponential growth. Exponential growth waits for you to capitalize. It waits for you to commit. It waits for you to sit down and execute. It doesn't wait, though, for you to feel ready. When you wake up in the morning, I want you to visualize this. I want you to visualize a world where where you're certain that good ideas flow through you. Where the world around you needs and appreciates your courage, your decision-making. Imagine a world where you aren't reliant on anyone or anything to fix the issues in your life, to make things better. Instead, you see yourself as the guy or gal that makes it happen, that steps up. You're responsible for being the change you want to see. I want you to imagine stepping outside your house, shoulders back, head held high, excited to go chase down all that opportunity. Because one, you know it's there, and two, you know you are worthy of it. Now hold that thought and think, this could be the reality you live. As soon as you wait for it, give yourself permission to live that way. How different would your life be if you greenlit those things? See, it's hard to break away from the framing that we've given ourselves, especially over time, how it's materialized. It's hard to reinvent the identity you've created for the person staring back at you in the mirror. But the truth is, all worthwhile things are hard. I love the Robin Sharma quote. It says, if you want what only the 5% have, you need to be willing to do what only the 5% are willing to do. And sure, this could be physical, dedication, long hours. Could be a lot of things. But before any of that, How about seeing yourself worthy of someone who can become the 5%? That in and of itself is hard. In fact, believing that for me was one of the greatest challenges of my life. Seeing myself as that person, right? That doesn't come easy. It has to be chipped away at, earned. But when you create that mentality, when you hold on tight and you walk towards it relentlessly, you become it. Little by little, day by day. So much of life is making yourself believe you are who you want to be. It's a perpetual feedback loop of sorts. You believe you are, so you act like it, which then reinforces your belief, which prompts greater action, and around we go. I'm going to give you sort of an arbitrary example of how powerful this can be. A few months ago, for the first time, I hired a cleaning service, which my rationale used to be, dude, put on a podcast, zone out, clean up a little bit. Once a week, who cares, right? But that little investment changed a lot. One, my place looks nicer, so I feel better and I'm more productive. It's consistently just nicer to be here. And two, and most important, is that it prompts me to think like the creator and founder and business owner I want to be. It helped prompt a mental shift or further a mental shift. It says I am the type of person who's very methodical with my time. My time equals too valuable to do anything that doesn't push my art or business forward. It's that simple. And that bleeds into other decisions I make. Pushes that loop that we talked about, right? Some investments are valuable in that they help shape your perception. On days where I'm writing, where I'm not going out, or I have no meetings, I try not to wear sweatpants and a basketball jersey, right? And at first it's like, it's comfortable. Who cares? No one's around. Yeah, true. But would the type of person we visualized at the beginning of this episode wear that? Probably not. He'd probably try and be more consistent in how he felt, and how he acted, and how he carried himself. It's half the battle. Same thing with waking up early. Is it really the end of the world if I were to sleep in? No, it's really not. But would the type of person we mentioned at the beginning of this episode sacrifice a little bit to get a head start? I think he would. To me, rolling out of bed whenever we want simply says I'm not quite ready to be the next version of myself or level of myself. I'm okay with how things are, right? There's this sense of ambition and excitement, manufactured urgency in getting up before or as the sun's rising. I mean, to me, that's just how it is. Doesn't mean it's the only way, but to me, it's one of life's hidden advantages. In other words, it's very likely that if you do those things, you will start to feel like the type of person who does those things. And there's power in that. We can do so much, create so much change, add so much value, but we don't even consider it in many cases because it feels too foreign. We're nowhere near giving ourselves permission to pursue that greatness we're capable of obtaining. Our day-to-day looks very different. Our actions, right, the decisions we make are very different. In order to grow, we have to set ourselves and the world around us up for growth. We have to surround ourselves with people that push us towards the place we want to be. Do things that align with our intended trajectory. Arrange the pieces so that they are indicative of what's possible, not what was. I keep learning how small the adjustments are in life that shape and reshape our reality. So small that no wonder they're laughed at, ignored. It's the little things we do that comprise how we feel, how we see ourselves. The identity, the role we play, is just the culmination of these little decisions over time. So as you wake up in the morning, remember, you are that person. The one who moves with confidence, who acts with courage, who helps and adds value to those around him. Good ideas do flow through you. Greatness is waiting to be unveiled, but you need to believe it for yourself and start making the little adjustments that will reinforce it. Get that feedback loop in motion. How you feel becomes what you do, becomes how you feel, becomes what you do. Right? And it'll amaze you that you didn't free yourself sooner, that you didn't unleash your potential earlier. As the saying goes, the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. The second best is right now. So close your eyes, visualize how great life will become, and start planting. There's a quote that states, "Whatever you are, be a good one." The pride you take in your work and the quality you're looking to obtain throughout, well, it's just as important as the direction you are heading. And I spent some time thinking about this. I was recently on an 11-hour flight home from Japan where, I got to see a lot. I learned a lot. A few things I want to share over the course of the next couple weeks. But there was one that stood out to me above all, right? One that I felt I needed to inject into my personal life. And so let's start there. It's the apparent pride that the Japanese take in their culture. Now, admittedly anecdotal, right? Based on a relatively quick experience. I was only there for about a week, but also it was the thing that was most evident, right? That jumped out at me. It felt sacred from the way they talked about being Japanese, at least those few short conversations I was able to have, to the cleanliness of the cities and buildings. I mean, the subway in Tokyo was so clean that it felt like a simulation. To every car that drove by being washed and waxed, and I mean every car. I saw no trash on the street. There were no homeless people out, which, given that I was in the busiest part of Tokyo, seems to be quite the feat. The bottom line is, these folks across the board take tremendous pride in themselves and their communities. Now, I can't speak, nor am I going to attempt to speak to the socioeconomic impact of that type of standard. But I can tell you that in many ways, from a personal standpoint, there was something powerful about it. I can tell you that my first instinct was, again, to inject that mentality into as much of my own world as I can. That taking pride in your surroundings and your outward appearance makes you feel better inside. That when your world is messy and cluttered, so is your mind. That when you don't invest in your environment, it probably diminishes your likelihood of succeeding in it. There's power in pride, in caring and taking responsibility for that which is yours. I said something similar in an episode last week talking about identifying your North Star and acting the part. And someone commented under the video, agreed, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I really like that. I think it sums it up beautifully. Now, I'm not ignorant enough to think that Japan is perfect because I spent a week there and the subways were clean. I'm sure underneath the hood, it has flaws, like every society does, like every individual does. But pride in oneself and surroundings doesn't appear to be one of those flaws. I think it's a source of strength. And seeing this came at a time when I needed it most. Perhaps I may have even, subconsciously been looking for it. And over the years, I've realized this in different areas of my life, without knowing in many cases that I was longing for consistency, pride, not just in a few habits, but in the greater overall picture. Getting into shape, I think, is the easiest example to demonstrate. Because it's not just a habit change, it's a lifestyle change, right? To be truly fit, you have to raise your standards across the board, adjust many aspects of your life so that they essentially come together to create something new. It was pride and focus and attention on when I woke up, what I ate, obviously how and when I worked out, what I said yes to, what I said no to. My work and social lives were also inextricably linked to those decisions. And in neglecting some aspects there diminished the stock of all the others. It's taking pride in how you do everything. It's not allowing yourself to fall short of a particular standard. When you don't let the little things fall off, it creates an environment where you can conquer the big things. That's why I think that quote is so impactful. Whatever you are, be a good one. Not in one area or in, one aspect of who you are, but in totality. Set a standard, right? Don't allow yourself to fall below it. You will feel better, freer, healthier. If the car is dirty, the office space is probably cluttered too, which means so is the desktop, which means so is the mind and its way of navigating and processing information. Nothing is completely siloed off. Or on the other hand, if one thing is immaculate, odds are everything is, right? So that little trip was a beautiful reminder to raise the bar in all aspects of my life. The standard can't just apply to my work or my art. Everything is intertwined. Greatness is holding on to the standard you set, the value system you deem meaningful, and accepting absolutely nothing less.